Kristen Hunter, who runs our volunteers, is out and has hired a couple of folks to help us, and we feel really grateful to have them helping us. And we also always welcome volunteers too. So if you want to join the volunteer team, but we're glad to have those options, and Nathan, I'm really appreciative as he figures out our system. So, an imperfect football savior. How did I end up talking about football today? That's a good question. You know, we had our humanist Seder last night, and of course today is Easter, celebrated by many of our family and friends, and some of us at about 1 o'clock when we head to our in-laws' homes, perhaps. The Easter Bunny may have visited your home and visited mine this morning. And usually this time of year, I'm talking about stories of liberation and renewal. I'm talking about you know, how we bring all these different stories from different traditions and different times in our life together and what they might mean for us in our own lives and in our own tradition today. But instead, I'm talking about football. It was an auction platform, that's the answer. It's always the answer, but it's something a little bit strange. It was a few years back, actually. I think it was really like 3 years ago. Perry Sedman purchased one of the platforms that I offer sometimes up at the auction. We've had some great platforms out of that offer. You all have really good ideas about what I should talk about. And so Perry bought it and then later told me what the topic was and said, I'd really like you to talk about RG3. And I said, is that like Star Wars? It's not, it turns out. Robert Griffin III, and we're going to hear a little bit more about Robert Griffin, but I actually thought at first Perry might be joking. And then I got this in the mail. And then I started getting other things in the mail, just already dropped them off on Sunday. And so I collected them in my mailbox. This is, 2013, 2012 here. So I started collecting these things, and I thought, well, at some point I'll actually have to do that platform. And here we are, 3 years later. Now, when I first got the assignment from Perry, I was, as you can imagine, really flattered, because obviously what Perry was trying to indicate by asking me to speak about Robert Griffin III was that, like Robert Griffin III, and remember this was a few years ago, like Robert Griffin III, you know, I was this amazing, wonderful star sent to save all of the world. RG3, a huge football star. He was, you know, the second NFL draft pick. Did I say that right? Is that right? Come to save the Washington team. We're going to come back to that. But I want to have a timeout for just a moment to talk about the Washington team. You'll hear me refer to it. That's not the main topic of this platform, the name of the Washington team. But if we're talking about imperfection, we cannot let it go by. Many of you are familiar with the sort of really long conversation about the name of the Washington team and about whether it's appropriate, which it's not, whether it honors people's inherent worth, which it doesn't, whether it is sensitive and acceptable as we learn and try to be more respectful of all the cultures around us. It is not. The general arc over this month as we talk about imperfection is really kind of the acceptance of the imperfect, you know, recognizing and noticing our flawed selves and the flawed lives and flawed world we live in, and coming to some understanding of them. It's about acceptance. But when I think about this particular part of the Washington team, I think instead about a quote from Angela Davis, recent quote, I think. She said, "I'm no longer accepting the things I cannot change. I'm changing the things I cannot accept." That's how I feel about the name of the Washington team, and Perry, I think, would agree with me. He's written a number of letters to the editor and call-ins and trying to get that name changed, and I think he has some alternatives. You can see him afterward, and he'll tell you what his plans are. So I wanted to make that side note and to articulate the way that imperfection is different than injustice. We don't want to confuse those two things and say that we're willing to live with injustice because, after all, the world is imperfect. We want to always make sure we remember the difference between the two. So back to RG3. Obviously, I got this assignment. I was really very flattered. Here's this huge star. He came to save the Washington team. Robert Griffin III was brought on as a quarterback, as you might know, the second NFL draft pick or something like that. But he was actually very shortly voted offensive co-captain. Someone is going to come up later and tell me how I got literally every single thing he's saying wrong. But he was then voted offensive co-captain by his teammates, which is actually a huge honor. You're selected as quarterback by the team decision makers, you know, the big honchos in charge, but your teammates elect the captains and co-captains. So here was this young guy. There was a big show of confidence in him. He seemed like a great guy. Obviously, Perry had chosen this topic for me because he saw all of the comparisons between me and the great RG3, the rising star, the perfect one, who rose to the top and met everyone's expectations. So, if you follow football, you may be aware that it didn't work out exactly like that. Robert Griffin III was brought on to the Washington team right after college in 2012. He went to Baylor. He won the Heisman Trophy there. He was chosen with that second pick, which means that, as I understand it, that the team could have chosen almost anyone in the NFL draft pool. In the NFL, this is like a co-created platform. And that's what this is. Could have chosen almost anyone in the NFL draft pool, and they chose him. He also, I discovered, graduated 7th in his class from high school and was class president his senior year. He actually graduated a semester early because he finished all his credits early. So he's no slouch in the intelligence and leadership departments as well. And he shot to fame because of that pick with all these huge hopes riding on his shoulders. He was NFL Rookie of the Week multiple times, Rookie of the Month. He was the youngest NFL player to, and I quote, achieve a perfect passer rate.
Rating.
Does that mean he caught the football a lot? It does, right? No, he passed it a lot, and other people caught it. Thank you. Okay. It's very good. He was very good. That's the point. And then, as I understand it, a ball hit his knee in just the wrong way. But he had a major injury. He was removed from starter status, and then multiple injuries later. He actually was told at one point he would have to compete to get his quarterback position back again, although in the end he was given starter for that season. In 2013, hope still sprang anew. Mike Jones in the Washington Post wrote, "The reset button has been hit. The surgically repaired knee feels great, and Robert Griffin III believes he is poised for a breakout." Now, from what I can tell from the articles and my obviously somewhat shaky understanding of football, part of the problem with Robert Griffin III and his injuries is that he insisted on playing in a way that allowed aggravation of those injuries, right? Is that right? Yeah, that's right. And indeed, the Washington team has not shot to success with his leadership. Sally Jenkins wrote in the Washington Post just this past February, 2 head coaches in succession have had major problems with Griffin. 2 good, proven offensive minds that know how to teach young quarterbacks and get them to the postseason. Neither has been allowed to do his job. She's complaining about Dan Snyder here as well. But the result is that Griffin is 3/4 of the way toward being ruined. An oft-injured quarterback who just turned 25, who has gone 5 to 15 as a starter over his past 2 seasons and has glaring weaknesses in both physical performance and temperament. So now I think probably didn't mean to compare me to RG3. I feel pretty sure about that. That was probably like an anti-comparison, I'm sure. Actually, the thing is, as the years went on and I didn't write this platform, it got more and more interesting to me. It's not that interesting, you know, to have an amazing football player that everybody thinks will be amazing go and be amazing and win. It's fun, I imagine, but it's not that interesting. Now, all of a sudden, we had a man who inspired headlines like, "Why We Expect the Impossible from Our Sports Stars," and a whole book called RG3, The Promise, which includes a detail of a moment when Robert Griffin III was in a church service called by the Holy Spirit, bound by the responsibility of anointment. Talk about heavy responsibility on your shoulders. All of a sudden, thinking about Robert Griffin III and his work became much more human, much more possible, much more, as it turns out, like my own story. Some of you know I'm in my 7th year here, and my first few years had a particular, I gave them a title after the first couple of years. I came here this is my first settlement, so the first place that I have served as a called or appointed clergy person. And so I came here after seminary, where I was, of course, amazing and perfect. And after an internship at another congregation, and you know, interns, I was amazing and perfect there as well. And then I came here and I figured I would clearly, equally, be amazing and perfect. I titled those first couple of years, when I thought about it or talked about it with mentors and friends, "The years when I discovered the myth of my own exceptionalism." They were the years when the amazing and perfect started to fall away a little bit. I didn't have to just take classes on this anymore. I didn't even have to just be the intern, where someone's backing you up all the time or telling you how to do it right, saving you from your worst mistakes. The myth of my own exceptionalism. And suddenly, Robert Griffin III felt more and more familiar to me. And so I began to think, as I thought about RG3, about why we expect the impossible from our sports stars, I thought about why we expect the impossible from anyone. It is Easter today. I mentioned that, you might be aware. So I'm going to talk about Jesus for like a really small amount of time. If you cannot take it, you are welcome. Look out the window. We have this beautiful artwork now. You can look at the imperfection thing and think about how this part of the platform is really imperfect. So there's, you know, sort of a popular understanding, I think, sometimes of Christianity in America. Sometimes I call it the American Hallmark version of Christianity. It's the one on Hallmark cards or kind of, you know, embroidered on pillows. And that version of Christianity tells us that the Easter story, and really the story of Jesus in general, is the story of this perfect person. So perfect that he's God, right? So perfect and amazing. And so someone that we emulate and try to be. Everything planned out, every step just as expected. For me, as I went through the Christian seminary that I attended and tried to understand and learn from and struggle with this story that I hadn't grown up with but that was so meaningful to so many people around me, for me, the part that was much more interesting than the perfect Jesus was the imperfect one, the doubting Jesus, the unsure and scared Jesus. It's Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane before his betrayal and crucifixion, Jesus who wonders why the disciples can't just stay awake with him